right, can everyone hear me okay? All right. All right, let's have some fun. I know I'm standing between you and lunch, so which is always can be a challenge. So let's have some fun with this. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my background, just for purposes of context, in case you don't know much about me, which I wouldn't expect you to know much about me. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about some lessons I've learned from failure. You know, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about how I'm going to start my next company, which is a little weird because I'm actually doing a company right now. But what I actually mean is how would, what am I trying to do now in the current company? And if we have a little bit of time, we're going to have some fun with a little puzzle, which I'm going to leave you with. So very quickly, background, I've been doing entrepreneurship. I've been doing startups for about, I guess, 15 years, depends on how you count it. And I say that I'm a serial entrepreneur because I haven't really made it yet, because folks like Mark Zuckerberg, they're not serial entrepreneur. He's not a serial entrepreneur. He's done, that's, I think he's there. But my first company was a natural language software company, which I did in the mid-90s, one of the very earliest ones that did use machine learning to assist natural language processing. We sold that to a search engine, and for the most part, it was a failure. Investors recovered some money, but not all of it, and went back to school at MIT, tried to finish, dropped back out again. Asian parents not too happy. Went and started my second company with my buddy Sridhar, who was coming with me to my second adventure. We'd been known each other since the end of high school. We built a medical device business over the course of 10 years. It was actually pretty successful. Built it out to be about 100 million in revenue, profitable, 150 people in Boston, so it was pretty good. And then I met John Scully, and we decided to. And after becoming friends, I asked him one day, just say, hey, do you want to start a company? Not really expecting much, and surprisingly, he said yes. And so I said, wow, that's great. So I called up my buddy once again and said, hey, you want to do it third time? Third time's a charm, right? And so we started Misfit. This was in 2000, just a few years, about 3 years ago. And the quick timeline for that is, we did our own seed round of financing. We felt we were too old to do seed rounds anymore. And so we just did it ourselves, had a prototype, raised a Series A pretty quickly from a couple of notable investors, Founders Fund, Peter Thiel from Founders Fund, and Vinod Khosla from Khosla Ventures. And almost scandalously so, shortly after raising the round of financing, we actually decided to pivot. And everyone seemed okay with it, which was great. And we did a crowdfunding campaign on our very first product, which is the Misfit Shine, an activity tracker, which I have a couple of here. And it did great. It blew up the Indiegogo campaign. Indiegogo is kind of like Kickstarter, but I think a lot better and friendlier. It did really well. We took it to CES, which is the big consumer electronics show, and had a lot of fun there, did well there. And Apple, we encountered Apple. We launched the product with them in all 15 countries later that year. And one thing led to another, raised a second round of financing from Horizons, which is a venture capital firm in Hong Kong, associated with Li Ka-shing, the richest man in Asia. We went on to do a number of deals with Coca-Cola, with Victoria's Secret, with Swarovski. Were selected as the official activity tracker for the Olympics and then the World Cup, and it was just quite a whirlwind. Then we started releasing more products. Recently did a round of financing with Xiaomi, which is a big Chinese tech company, if you've heard of them. And been slowly making our way into the smart home space, which I think is actually quite an interesting place to be. So that's the quick whirlwind background in terms of who the company of Misfit as a company and where I am today. The company based in San Francisco, I think some of you had a chance to visit us when you're making a trek out there. Thank you for coming. So design happens in San Francisco, about 40 people there. Then everything else done in Shenzhen and Ho Chi Minh City. I'm from Vietnam, so we do some of the work there. Manufacturing, surprisingly, is done in Seoul, Korea. And as Claire was just saying, we invent and manufacture wearable and smart home products. I'm just going to speak very briefly about wearables and smart home, and then spend the most of the time talking about these lessons learned. Basically, we picked, what we wanted to do, Shrita and I, was pick a category that was where we knew the market was going to be growing over the next 5 to 10 years. You know, we felt that over the last several decades, we've been through several revolutions in computing, the PC revolution, the internet, mobile and social in the 2000s, and now I believe we're in the thick of the so-called Internet of Things era, where things in our car, our home, on our bodies are connected. Things on our bodies, we call them wearables. And if there was one thought I'd leave with you, it is that whether you think wearables is overhyped or not, honestly, I kind of think it is, because it's a little early. But that's okay. We'll take the hype. So wearables 1.0, we're very much in an era where you have bulky plastic things. You got to charge it. It's for athletes. It's tracking activity, heart rate, that kind of thing. And I really think we're in a transition over to an era where these products are going to be much more lifestyle oriented, things that you would wear all of the time, that would be more appealing to wear. You're going to see some more intersections with fashion. And most importantly, I think these things are going to be more useful. I think that one of the reasons why these products have had some barriers to adoption is because of lack of utility, which seems kind of odd. Right now, what we've seen is products that are made out of, that are doing activity tracking of various sorts, health monitoring, alerts and notifications. You know, if you forgot these products at home and you didn't, and you're halfway to work, you probably would not turn around for them, right? They're just not that compelling just yet, you know, compared to, say, to your iPhone, which you would definitely turn around for, right? Wearables 2.0 is where a lot of these use cases will be headed, where we're going to be doing, where we're going to be seeing a lot more useful use cases. Safety-related things, identifications, we'll be seeing wearables that, where you will see payments and security applications getting implemented, as well as controls, being able to control smart home products and whatnot through these devices. So in case you didn't know what we did, our first product is the Shine, this activity tracker was basically designed to be very pretty and wearable first. The wearable tech that was designed not to look like wearable tech, that was incredibly customizable. And our second product, a really affordable version of that, which was plastic, a product that makes your bed smart so that you don't have to wear anything actually when you, and you'll get all sorts of great data about how well you sleep. And one of our first home products is a smart light bulb, which is in itself very beautiful and also generates very beautiful light. And all of this is obviously connected. All right, so that's the quick run through in terms of my background in wearables and Internet of Things. If you want to talk about wearables and Internet of Things, I'd be delighted to talk more about that with you. Just drop me a note. But what I really wanted to share was just things I learned from the last 3 companies over the last couple decades or so. I was at an event last year, which I'm actually going to right after this event in San Francisco, where I heard Bill Gates being interviewed by Jack Dorsey about failure, and they went on for like 2 hours. It was amazing, and I was like, wow, you know, if Gates can talk about failure for 2 hours, then I could probably talk about it for about 10-15 minutes. You know, he always said at the end, he said at the end, you know, like, well, if this Microsoft thing doesn't work out, there's always Harvard. So, and I guess I could say if this Misfit thing doesn't work out, I could always try to finish my degree at MIT. Okay, so I just want to share with you 10 things really quickly that I've just kind of learned. And it's really a hodgepodge of lessons that honestly, you guys probably already know just going through business school, but I never had a chance to go to business school, so I had to learn this the hard way. First is hiring. It's one of my favorite topics. It's one of the most important things you can do as an entrepreneur, as you know. And the things I've learned, every time I've hired in desperation, always ended in disaster. Like I've almost never made a great hire when it was done out of desperation. Often, because of whatever hiring committees that get created, because you're not, one is not autocratic about hiring. Often people are, you're looking for people with no weaknesses rather than with incredible strength. And so I say hire for strength, not just lack of weaknesses. And this last point was something that I learned from John Sculley, the former CEO of Apple, who's now the co-founder of Misfit. He always said, only work with people you like. And I always thought that was a little odd, because I thought, well, you're John Sculley, everybody wants to work with you. I'm just a chump. I gotta still hustle and make it work. And I've just learned over the years that he is absolutely right. We still have, you always have that choice, and it's really important that that you make the right choice there, because working with people you don't like, it's just the most terrible kind of life situation to be in. So it's really worth it to make that decision. In terms of who, if I learned anything from my first company, where we hired a bunch of really smart people, I learned that hiring just for IQ, we hired a bunch of smart people, and we had a lot of social problems, a lot of egos, and just not a great situation. And so in my second company, we decided to hire based on experience. Found out that a lot of these people that we thought had 20 years of experience didn't actually have 20 years of experience, but 1 year of experience 20 times. And it's just not really, and it's actually worse. So we learned that it was really about, it wasn't just about experience. So in the first company, it was about, we learned that what I like to look for is skills, and not just IQ, wisdom and great judgment, and not just experience. Is there an easy interview question to find out about wisdom? Not that I know of, but I don't know. We're learning. We're trying out different things. And last but not least, cultural fit. And I'll talk a little bit more about this. Culture is something that I think we talk a lot about in Silicon Valley, and well, it is quite important. So I think that's why people talk about it. Setting the foundation early, I think, is one of the most important things that I've learned, because your culture actually just kind of, I wouldn't say fossilizes, but it does solidify, and it's quite hard to change after a certain point. Hiring, firing based on values, super important. This is something I've learned to always kind of err towards. Is performance is one thing, but values is kind of non-negotiable. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. The last point, if you're doing a startup, honestly, it's about work-life integration, not work-life balance. If one of the first questions you have in mind is, oh, what's work-life balance going to be like when I do a startup? Well, there isn't much of one. There's work. Work is life, life is work, and that's just kind of. I think some people would probably disagree with me and say that they could really partition their lives, but you're kind of always thinking about it, and I don't know. I think startups need some level of obsession in order to really succeed. Speaking of values, I think one of the most important things I've learned is really setting out values that will drive decisions and not just generic values. So I believe Enron had values like integrity and communication, and it's like, are you not going to have integrity? No. So I'll share with you what our values are in just a second. But it's important that they're specific and can drive decisions. Reinforcing them with stories so that people can remember these values, and the team really embodies it. That's quite important for us. And so we've institutionalized a few stories where they've just been passed on, not necessarily by design, but they just happen to get passed on, and they get retold and retold and retold, and people have seemed to that seems to be working. And recognizing people. when appropriate, who share values and just saying, hey, this is an example of something that's really cool and that we love here at Misfit. Everyone, please do stuff like that. This is quite, this is kind of taken out of Jack Welch's book, partially, in terms of this value versus performance consideration. You know, people who deliver on their commitments, people who don't deliver on their commitments, people who share your values, people who don't share your values. And probably the most striking quadrant is the lower left here. There's people who deliver but don't share your values. And I've learned time and time again over 3 startups that those are the folks who are probably the most dangerous to the organization, in fact, because they have the greatest chance for influence in the company and in terms of changing your very core cultural values. So I used to think it was a difficult decision to let such people go, but I've come to learn that it's actually it should be a very easy decision. So you'll always encounter that person. Oh man, they're so good, but man, he's such a jerk, and it's just not worth it. Not worth it. There are other great people out there, and you got to keep doing the hard work of recruiting. At Misfit, it's about doing things differently. It's about because we have to, because we don't have those kinds of resources. It's about being thoughtful. It's about doing more with less, and being a servant leader, meaning the more senior you are, the more service oriented, especially to your direct reports, you're expected to be. And so you come up with your own values. Think for yourself and think about what's non-negotiable for you and communicate that to the team. People. I think this is something that, we talk about recruiting, getting talent, the war for talent, culture a lot, but I think the discussion around investing in people often gets overlooked, especially at an early stage. I mean, we're busy building a product. I don't have time to train people. What are you talking about? You got to train yourself. Well, maybe that's true for a period of time, for a season, but then at some point, one of the best ways to get productivity out of a team is to make the team more effective at what they do. So investing in training early, time and money, investing in just feedback. Feedback is huge. So at Misfit, we believe everybody has a very basic right to regular, honest, and bi-directional feedback processes. So we have a whole template for that. And finally, letting people fail. I've got a few little nuggets that I've collected from my mentors over the years, and this is one of my favorite ones from Vinod, where he talks about allowing people to attempt things that they didn't know they were capable of. I think that's one of the most powerful things that I've learned in the last few years. The environment, I think the key to really making it to be making your startup or your work culture to be amazing is to really make it into a place where work doesn't feel like work. If work is ever boring, that is the hardest form of work ever. I mean, you're working 7 a.m. to 1 a.m. every day, right? I mean, those are startup hours. That's the reality, okay? There's no way you can sustain that kind of thing 6, 7 days a week for 7 years. There's no way you could sustain that if it felt like work at any point. And so at Misfit, we've created our environment. Again, think for yourself in terms of how you would create an environment. But the way we think about it is work that gives you a sense of purpose, working with people you like, so doing cool stuff with your buds, and being surrounded by good food. I mean, what greater what a greater situation is there, right? And one of my favorite quotes from John, and I tell this to new recruits when they say, well, why should I work with a startup? And I always say, well, one of the benefits is you get to do things that you're not qualified for. It's really true. Why I was like 4, right? And why should a 24-year-old kid get to be a CEO of a company? That's just not, should not happen. But someone gave me money, so I had a shot, and well, they lost money in the first company. But they invested again in my second company, in all 3 actually. And some of the investors did. Leading. I'm going to try to speed up a little bit. Hope you don't mind the accelerated pace here, but these slides will be available. Believing in standing up for what you believe in, I think, is one of the most important things I've learned in the last couple of companies. And again, it seems kind of trite to say that, but I feel like I've learned it the hard way. That is what one needs to do. Again, another quote from Vinod. The regret that comes from doing something that you shouldn't have is temporary, but the regret that comes from not doing something you should have is inconsolable. And it's really, really true. When I think about the things that I didn't do, which I should have done in my previous companies, when I should have stood up for what I believed in, even though I was young and told that I was inexperienced and didn't know what I was talking about, I should have stood up anyways. Product, I'll skip over this a bit, but you know the old saying from Jobs, it's not the user's job to know what they want. So, and no matter what you're designing, what you're making, at some point there's a user. One of the biggest things I think entrepreneurs forget, or at least maybe the first or second time entrepreneurs, is that, especially in Silicon Valley, a lot of us founders are very product focused. I just want to build a really great product and they're going to buy it. Well, I think the most important thing for you to do is actually for us entrepreneurs to do, is to build a business. That's why people invest in us, and it's because they want us to build a business, not just a great product. Otherwise, just be a product manager somewhere. Being lean, I'll skip through that. If you've read Eric Ries's book on Lean Startup, just totally awesome book. It's about minimizing the cost of experimentation so that you can fail quickly, so that you can get to the right product, and just being relentlessly focused on user feedback. Okay. Sales. All right. In the later part of this presentation, which I won't be able to get to now, sales, I always say that the most important role for an entrepreneur is sales. You know, if you're thinking about doing your startup, just consider the following thing. The most important role you're going to do in the company is to be a salesperson. You're trying to convince investors to give you money for something that's incredibly high risk. You're trying to get the media to talk about you when there's nothing to talk about. You're trying to get people to work for you for half the rate that they would normally get at way higher risk profile. You're trying to get customers to buy something that doesn't exist. And you're trying to get partners to work with you when they really shouldn't be partnering with startups. And so that is your job day in and day out, it's sales. And so I'll just leave it at that. And the last thing I've learned, probably one of the most important things I've learned from a recent mentor, Chairman Li Ka-shing, just an amazing business person, is to give first and to get later. And his thing that he's said that has stuck with me for quite some time now is always leave money on the table for the other side. It's super, you know, as entrepreneurs, I think we're all driven to try to optimize, and at some point, it actually isn't the best thing to do. So I will, it's 20 minutes, so I'm gonna leave it at that. And I'm gonna let you think about questions, but I have a little puzzle, which I'm gonna leave with you. It's about thinking out of the box. And like I said, I'll leave these slides on because I basically skipped through the second half there. But it's the 9-dot puzzle where you connect the dots with straight lines, right? And I'm going to give prizes out to people who can solve this. Oh, who's heard of this puzzle before? If you have to connect the puzzle with like 4 lines instead of 5. Okay, so if you've raised your hand, you're disqualified. But I encourage the rest to think out of the box and see how you can connect those 9 dots with just 4 lines instead of 5, okay? So that's 5 lines. You can do it in 4. Questions and answers. Questions, I guess.
Yeah, questions. Okay.
Yeah, I'll let you.
Is it on? My question is, how do you distinguish between cultural fit and groupthink?
Cultural fit and man, that's a really hard question. You know, I think groupthink might be. When I think of groupthink, I think of people thinking the same kind of thoughts and not innovating, not being a brainstorm. But I think cultural fit is more about values fit. Like, what would you kind of do instinctively? And I mean, we have very basic. We only have like 4 things. You know, you got to think differently. You must think differently. You cannot. There's no choice. Okay, you have to do more with less. And so these are guideposts. You know, and questions to ask ourselves. But I don't think it like limits us. You know, I think forcing ourselves to do more with less. I don't think will constrain us. I don't know. Not the best answer. Sorry, but I think yeah, cultural values are more guideposts. This lady here.
Thank you for the speech. So
Yep.
on the slide you said like it's not user job to do what they want. So in that case, how do you do the user test? How do you collect the user feedback? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a really great question. So we actually will let the designers and product inventors come up with stuff and let them iterate by trying it out on people. And so it's prototype, so watch users, prototype, repeat. And I think that's what Apple does. So rather than focus groups like, hey, what would you like in a smartphone? Oh, what's a smartphone? Well, I don't know, just think of a phone that can do a bunch of stuff. What would you want in it? I don't know, like a lot of really cool buttons. But how about something that didn't have any buttons? You know, they wouldn't, people wouldn't even, if it hasn't been invented yet, they wouldn't know how to invent it necessarily. So, so it's, yeah, so just user testing.
Hi, can you tell some story about the culture misfit or the people who have not shared your values and you had to get rid of them?
Sure. We had this one gentleman, I mean, sure, plenty of stories. Not too many, but we've had some. Had an amazing salesperson. This guy could sell sand to a man in the desert, you know. An incredible salesperson. Just was a little self-absorbed and just really was not getting the whole servant leadership thing. Wanted people to do stuff for him rather than, as he was becoming more senior, rather than the other way around. Taking out the trash was too low of a job, and put him on warning. Didn't work out, and we let him go. And despite amazing performance, and we were crippled as a company actually on a commercial basis for like a quarter. It's totally worth it.
Thank you for the talk. What is your feeling and cultural fit with Chinese investor and in particular Xiaomi? Like, I think a lot of people, in particular Westerners, me included, I guess, are a little bit worried if there is a good cultural fit experience and yeah, what you would recommend.
Yeah, that's so when we started Misfit, we really said, okay, this is our 3rd startup. We're too old to get investors that we can't get along with. It just really sucks. We had some negative experiences in the past where we just kind of put up with stuff for years, you know. And I said, that's it. We're not going to do that anymore. We're only going to work with people we like. And so we went with kind of like the new guard, so which I really think is like Founders Fund, Horizons, and Andreessen Horowitz. That's new guard, and very founder friendly, very believe in the founder kind of as the CEO kind of approach, and we love them. And so Xiaomi and whatnot and GGVC, it wasn't. They've been amazing partners, but they weren't what we expected. But overall, it's been actually pretty great. It's been great because there's a lot of mutual interest. You know, they like our design and our storytelling ability and our product marketing and ability to reach the West. We love their supply chain, you know, and their reach and insight into the Chinese consumers. So we have a lot to gain from each other. So there really hasn't been too much of a cultural clash. But yeah, that's actually a really important thing to ask and to consider if you're taking outside financing is what's the culture of the investor? You know, it's okay to ask them to pitch you on why they're a cultural fit. Yes.
Pretty good segue to that one, which was, as you think about taking money from investors, you know, a lot of people are kind of like, oh, someone's offering me money. I'm ecstatic. I'm going to take it, especially in the beginning, right? Yep. But how do you think about, is this person investing in me because of a commercial viability? Because ultimately that must play a very big part to it. But then the other part is also because he or she really believes in me and this actually may not be as commercial at the end of the day. So how do you kind of balance the commercial viability of it from a valuation and how much freedom you have to develop your product or your business going forward? Because, you know, most people are commercial, but some are less so?
So I hope they're investing in me generally because they think I'll be a commercial success of some sort. Otherwise, I guess there are like nonprofits here and stuff. So that's where your question comes from, right? I'll just say this, okay? One litmus test, one of my favorite litmus tests to when you're considering an investor is like, is this the right investor or not? Okay, so try the following test. Just imagine yourself in a situation where the company has made a mistake, especially if that mistake was because of you. Okay, like it was very clear that you made the mistake, you were the moron, and you did something stupid, and a terrible thing happened. Okay, now is your first thought about that investor? Oh man, how am I going to position it with the investor? How am I going to present it to them? Or is your first thought to pick up the phone and call them and say, hey man, I really screwed up. Oh man, we're really screwed. What do you think we ought to do? And if it's the former, don't take them. And if it's the latter, definite candidate. And I have to say, like with Brian Singerman from Founders Fund, he's like the former. Yeah, he's like the latter, not the former. I've had investors who were like the former, where I did have that thought, like, man, what am I going to say to investors now? But with Brian, I pick up the phone and say, man, I did the dumbest thing ever. Okay, what do you think we ought to do? And there's no judgment. I'm sure there's a judgment bubble, a thought bubble at some point, but there's generally no judgment, and we work through it, and it's awesome. And because of that, he gets the full transparency that any other founder might get, and I get a ton of help and comfort, and know that I'm supported. So try that litmus test next time.
Hi, thanks. Great talk, by the way.
Yeah.
Being an entrepreneur in a startup is obviously what most people think about when they think about entrepreneurship.
Yep.
Many large companies are failing to nurture entrepreneurship. You've worked with large firms, Xiaomi, Apple. Which firms do you think are good at developing entrepreneurs, and what were the observations, or what would you consult if you were advising them to make entrepreneurship more accessible to larger companies?
That's a great. I've always been a big fan of Netflix. I think they do an amazing job of really getting people to do things differently and to act nimbly. I think. Honestly, I think Google is actually pretty good at that. They're amazingly a fast company, given their size. That's why they're such an incredible company. Xiaomi too, incredibly entrepreneurial in terms of what they expect from everybody, and I think a lot of that is the DNA from their founders, and the key management that they've gotten. And so those companies have done an amazing job, and they're moving. I mean, like Xiaomi, just give you a sense, they're about 4 years old, I think maybe 5 years old now. And they're worth over $50 billion. So you think Uber grew fast? Not even close compared to Xiaomi. And they did it with hardware, which is unbelievable. And they did it because they had small product teams. And as we like to call it, we love being highly autocratic. Lots of small teams with enormous ownership and P&L responsibility, right down to the product owners. And I think one of those things is just promoting a highly autocratic culture from a decision-making perspective, and it's hard to do. And being okay to let these little teams fail.
Yeah. As an entrepreneur, you probably don't have access to data for decision making all the time. So, do you trust your instincts? And if you do, when do you know to go with it or not? Considering you had a failed startup as well. So.
As we often like to say, let's try to use data, because if we're going to go based on opinions, let's go with mine, right? And so we try to be as data driven as possible. But you're right. All of the time, you're always lacking some form of data, and so having wise counsel is great, But at the end of the day, if you're lean, you're able to minimize the cost of experimentation. It's okay to make mistakes, but as long as you do it quickly and recover quickly. And one of my favorite things I've heard about recently is kill your darling ideas as fast as possible. Meaning like everyone's got their little idea that they love, right? And challenge it constantly. And so Astro Teller from Google X said that recently. I thought that was a really cool thing.
presentation. Quick question about hiring. How do you recognize wisdom over experience?
Well, I think, yeah, that like I said, I haven't really figured it out yet, but I do have some red flags that I look for. So if I hear people saying, if I hear things like, well, I've always done it this way, so I think that's how you should do it, without more context. Because the whole point of a startup is you're building something in a rapidly changing environment. If you had a long history that was incredibly predictable, then experience is probably good, because then you just have faster reaction time. But when you're inventing something new, when you're doing, presumably, if you're doing a startup, you're doing something different, whether it's a different product or a business model or market or whatever, there's going to be some non-predictable elements to it. And just having the humility to just say, I've done it this way for a long time, and I'm not sure it's going to actually work again. I'll try it, but it might be different. Having a little bit of that, I think, helps. And if I sense that there's a complete lack of that, then I would probably dive a little deeper.
One final question,
Sure.
and then we'll get to the puzzle.
Sure. Yep.
Hi, that was very exciting. You mentioned that the wearable space is like full of hype right now. So if you were to actually take the hype out of it, how do you think the wearable space will turn out in the next 5 years? And where do you think Misfit will be?
Right. I don't know if we'll be doing wearables in 5 years. That's why we took the word wearables out of our name. It's just Misfit now. Like I said, I think one of the biggest changes that are going to happen, and must happen, is these things have to be more useful. Just tracking your activity, buzzing when a text message comes in, or telling my heart rate. I was telling my mom about heart rate monitoring technology, and she said, if I knew what my heart rate was, the only thing it would do is probably raise it. And so, it's just got to be more meaningful and useful and really relevant to life. So relevant that you just like, oh my gosh, if I forgot my smartwatch, I got to go back and get it. Like, we can't even imagine that right now, right? We can't. But if it replaced your wallet, your key, all of your entire wallet, your keys, and was your medical ID, all in one, and all you had to take with you was your wearable instead of your keys and your wallet, that sounds pretty compelling. Yeah, I'd probably turn around for that, because I'd turn around for my wallet and my keys, right? So more useful use cases, better use cases, that is. And but there are a lot of challenges to the wearable space. So I think one of the big things that is kind of assumed is battery life. So wearables, that's like the bane of our existence, right? Is you're now wearing something that, first of all, wasn't all that useful, that you have to charge, that you've never had to charge in your life, right? And so, because we've never had to charge anything we wear in our entire history as a species, right? So I think overcoming battery issues and being more useful, and also being more wearable. A lot of stuff looks great. I mean, it was really functional, could be useful, but if it's just ugly, or if it's uncomfortable, you're not going to wear it. Right. All right. Anyone with some solutions? All right. I see him. Okay. So how am I going to do this? I've got like 5 things here. So let's see here. So I'll give 1 shine to a man and 1 to a woman. So all right, you've got a solution. All right, you got it. Well, that's 1. I'm going to give out the solutions, the prizes first. No. You can't lift up your pen. You can't lift up your pen. This gentleman over here.
Here we go. So.
And you haven't seen the solution before, right?
How's this? So if you start in the middle.
Yep. You got it.
Cool.
Otherwise, you get it. I mean, my argument when I first saw this is you could do 1 fat line, but that didn't fly. So, and how about you?
Yeah. We'll go from there.
Yeah. There you go. That's right. There you go. And how about a female?
I think I'm the same as this guy, but I also try doing an M.
You got it. All right. And so the solution. Oh, I guess I get one more. How about you? I always say, what's more interesting than talking about wearables than to have one, right? So.
You extend the lines from this one vertical and
Yeah.
horizontal. And
Yep.
you start
Yep.
from
You got it. Here we go. That's the flash. Last but not least. All right. So that's the solution. It's about thinking out of the box, right? You got to go out of the box, literally, and connect the dots. So now you've seen it. Thank you so much. It's a real pleasure and an honor to be here.